Today we are looking at the Roadster X4, a budget hub motor board from Veymax. There's a lot of budget boards out there, so let's see how this one competes. Starting with the specs. There's two different battery options available for the Roadster, a 216 and 288 watt hour option. The battery I'm using is the 216 watt hour. I believe the 288 version is using Samsung 40T cells, while the 216 is using some other generic brand of cell. The deck has a width of 9.8 inches at its widest point and a length of 37.8 inches. It's a good solid size for a standard street board, and it's fairly flexible since it's Canadian maple, but I wouldn't consider it super flexible. I'd say it's a good balance between stiff and flexy. Since this is a budget board, you have to taper your expectations when it comes to the performance. On the highest speed setting, it feels a little underwhelming. However, it's about on par with my Wowgo Mini 2, which is also a hub motor board. Climbing hills it will bog down, but I was still able to climb most hills I threw at it. Out of the box, the bushings feel very stiff. Taking a turn for me initially took a lot of effort until I adjusted the bushings. For most people, I would recommend to loosen them a little. The bushings are okay, but like a lot of boards, it's better to replace the bushings with riptides or whatever your preferred aftermarket is. Range is somewhat on the low end, and it varies. The Roadster is rated for 13 miles for a 165-pound rider. On a fairly warm day of 60 degrees, and with my overall weight with gear being 185 pounds, I got about 8 miles before the remote started complaining and it had 1 bar left. On a different day of 50 degrees with steep slopes, I got to roughly 6 miles before I was at the 1 bar spot. Not surprisingly, the slopes killed the range. For me, I like to get at least 10 miles in a board, so it seems for my weight I would need the larger battery option to obtain that. The Roadster also comes with these two rear red lights. They come unattached initially, so you will need to unscrew the rear truck to attach them. I am guessing they did this to avoid them being bent in delivery. They appear to just be independent bike light blinkers with 6 different modes and are not synced with the board in any way. It's still nice to have them as a rear red light for night rides. The board is fairly portable, as 20.5 pounds is a fairly reasonable weight. You can carry it from the truck or side carry it. It's too big for my gym locker though, but that's not surprising since it's not a short board. The wheels are 105mm in a style similar to cloud wheel sleeves that Veymax calls jelly wheels. I am glad they are using these over a smaller street urethane that are commonly used on budget boards. For a sleeve, it does good getting around on sidewalks, roads, and bike paths. You will still feel it though when you encounter those paths that aren't super smooth or taken care of. This is just the downside of using hub motors. What is nice with hub motors is the free roll you get while not using the throttle, as well as being able to kick push when the battery is out. The styling is okay. It's a standard longboard with the enclosure for the battery and ESC underneath in 2 separate casings like most boards. I think the battery enclosure especially looks a little clunky. From a side view, it's very visibly larger than the ESC enclosure. The grip tape design is okay, doesn't really stand out, but it's a nice simple look. Some will prefer this though, depending on their tastes. I think the deck guards take away from the sleekness of it, but they do serve a functional purpose. So overall, I wouldn't say the styling is anything great, but it gets the job done. The remote is a commonly used remote in other boards, 2 buttons and a thumb roller for throttle, so nothing unique here. The display has 4 bars for remote and board battery left and does the usual inaccurate reading of dropping once the battery is at 50%. At least that's how these feel to me. So basically you can't really tell what your battery is by using these bars. The board also has to be turned on by both the remote and the board physically itself. It lacks the feature of turning both on by just using the remote power button. I thought it might feel a little different compared to my Hobbywing boards since the ESC is LifeHawk, but it's been a smooth experience for me in both acceleration and braking regardless of what speed mode I use. The one major issue I had was this weird braking issue that caused the motors to go forward on hitting brake. After repairing the remote to the board and running the throttle for a few minutes, It eventually went away. I am not sure why this happened, but I would advise people to make sure your board properly brakes before first riding. Obviously this is a big issue, but it might just be some weird thing that only happened for me. While I am spoiled by the higher end boards I have, the Roadster overall is still a decent budget board. I also like that they went with the 105mm wheels rather than using a smaller street wheel like most budget boards do. After I solved the weird braking issue, I was enjoying my time on it. At the time of this video, the Roadster starts at $429, which is priced correctly for its budget board category. Veymax only seems to have hub motor boards on their site right now. I hope Veymax comes out with a belt or gear-driven board someday and expands their selection. As always, thank you again for watching. Until next time.